Welcome to the Casual Temple. Today we have the lovely
Yay!
and multi-talented Michelle De Belen as our guest today. Michelle is a Filipina American, an artist, tarot reader, spiritual guidance coach, and a passionate spiritual seeker. Our discussion today is going to be a subject near and dear to me, toxic spirituality. Ooh. So Michelle, it's so great to have you on the Casual Temple.
Brr, 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 brr,
Right.
brr. Air horn effect.
Totally. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. I'm so
I'm
glad to
so
have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. It's been like a whole year. I've
Yes.
literally made you wait a whole year.
Worth it.
I'm
It is
sorry
worth
about
it.
that.
Happy to wait. Yeah, you've been so great. I know you've been going through a lot, and this is why we're going to have this discussion today. Um, but yeah, change is hard. Spiritual change is hard. Um, but yeah, I reached out to you because I just kind of want to give a little background for the guests and the audience. Yeah, I reached out to you because I was like, oh, there's somebody who's kind of doing, magic and sort of like maybe in a indigenous Filipino way, or at least, trying to discover how to do that for themselves. And that was what was really interesting to you. And so that's when we originally started to chat. And then, as we were kind of communicating over the time, over the year, as you were like figuring out what we were going to talk about exactly. You kind of were going through these changes, and so that's what we're going to talk about today. But yeah, I'm so glad that you stayed connected, and that we stay connected, and yeah, because it's such a fascinating journey.
Yeah, and I told myself, you know what? The Lunar New Year, Aquarius new moon, I feel like this is the perfect time to talk about everything we're going to talk about and to
Yeah.
just how this journey has been like for me, because I feel like this journey, I've also spoken with like other Filipino Americans and Filipinos online, just like through my community, about what they've gone through. And
Mm,
oh man, I know that there's probably more than just me or the other persons I've spoken to about their spiritual path and what they've gone through.
yeah.
And yeah, there's definitely a lot of twists and turns on this journey that
Mm-hmm.
I've taken, and I felt like I needed to take that year off from doing readings, from even I felt like I needed to just go into hermit mode, and I was like
Right.
so afraid of being seen or perceived within this past year. So I've taken that journey to like heal so much of that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I'm so glad that you did that for yourself because it is, yeah, I'm a big hermit just anyway. So I'm always a hermit, but yeah, I'm glad that you took that time for yourself. So that's really wonderful. So can you kind of, I guess we just start or wherever you consider the beginning, um, and just kind of tell us your story and we'll just kind of go from there.
A lot of the beginning, man, I feel like there's so much of our beginnings like start with our ancestors, of course.
Mm, hmm.
And I feel like, growing up, you hear all of the stories of like the multo or the white lady. So from a very young age, where we get instilled with all this fear from like, oh, these magical mythical creatures and everything. So like from a very young age, there's all this like fantastical thinking, and whether we have like parents who support that or not, or even grandparents, and how their beliefs affect us. I feel like
Yeah.
that was the very beginning, because I would grow up hearing like all these stories from my grandpa. And so that just made me think, huh, what if there is some truth to what he's saying right now?
Right.
So it's like you're a kid and then you go off and do your own little experiments. You're like, I'm going to make potions. I'm going to do this. And then as you get older, you start to think like, huh, there's all these like little synchronicities that keep happening. I wonder,
Mm,
there must be something to like how I interact with the world. Because I feel like, there's that whole meme there's that meme that goes around that where we think like, oh, I remember the year or the day or the time when I started to develop consciousness or
mm-hmm.
became conscious. I remember like I was at least, I don't know, I remember just being younger than 10 and just looking at my hands like this, like just like
What is that?
examining my reality.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the very essence of us being aware of our own soul. I think
Mm.
that is the beginning of our spiritual path. I think that was probably the beginning of mine, is that existential crisis at 5 years old that you have
Right.
where you're like, "What?" Like, "Why am I getting so scared of all these weird dreams that I'm having, and being in this body? What does it mean to be in this body? I feel like an alien."
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so we go through so much of, like, I think just being Filipino American, like, be like, I know there's that whole conversation between, like, 1st and 2nd generation. Um, Even though I'm technically 2nd generation, it very much feels like I'm, like, a 1 to 1.5 generation, just because, like, I went back and forth from the Philippines so
Mm.
often growing up, and I grew up in a really very, like, tight-knit Filipino American community, like, a small, small community within rural, middle of nowhere Texas, where
Oof.
people would literally look at me like I was an alien.
Right.
So,
Right.
part of that beginning of that spiritual journey was you had to love God, you had to love
Mm.
Jesus in order to be accepted within a community. So, I had this feeling of being one, very much one with, like, God and God's creations. I remember I talk about it with, like, my cousin all the time. Whenever we were little, she would, like, start kicking this tree, and I was like, "Stop kicking that tree, that's one of God's creations."
Yeah.
So, I think just very, like, I felt like I lived in this very in tune, just very in tune way, and I think part of that is a lot of that trauma of being very aware that, "Oh, I don't look like everybody else."
Mm. Mhm.
And so those are the very beginnings. So I think if I didn't have all of those beginnings, I wouldn't have had my spiritual puberty, as what we call it,
Mm.
in my 20s.
Right.
So in my teens, my 20s, my teens. So, you end up starting picking up Silver Ravenwolf
Right.
teenage witch books
That's
at
right. Yes.
a half-price bookstore
That's
at
right.
16, and your mom's like, "Well, what are you reading?" I grew up in Catholic youth group in middle school, high school, and I think it was in high school when I started to question a lot of Catholicism, and I
Mhm.
started to question why things were the way they were. And so
Yeah.
I started picking up different books on Hinduism. I picked up a copy of the Quran, I picked up a copy of the Torah, and all these different books to try to figure out what the meaning was in
Mhm.
everything. And I think whenever I felt like I had a lot of weird things happening to me all at once, I think that's catapulted my journey. It
Mhm.
felt like I had a lot of near death type things happening to me where I felt like there's something here that's going on that's not right. Something's trying
Mhm.
to get my attention. There's something more here. I need to start digging deeper.
Yeah.
And I don't, and I was like, okay, what is a witch initiation? Am I going through a witch initiation right now? Is that what this is?
Mhm.
And so, I mean, I feel like there's a whole different other conversation with that whenever it comes to, like, folk witchery and, like, initiation in that context,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and in, like, ATR and things like that, but I felt like life was, or the or death was trying to initiate me in some sort of way to get me to understand.
Mhm.
And started to see a lot of this started in college, a lot of different visions of things. And I started to get very scared,
Yeah.
to where I was like, "Mom, I think there's something going on. I don't know if I'm going crazy.
Right.
I'm starting to see some things. I
Mhm.
don't know if I'm schizophrenic." And so she calls her sister and she goes, "Hey, I think mom's," or she says, "Michelle's starting to sound a lot like our dad."
Oh.
And I'm like, what do you mean?"
Yeah,
So,
what? Explain,
oh,
mom.
broken mind.
Yeah.
Oh no. But what I think she meant was, oh, my grandpa was well known as the barangay, like the village healer, the monk.
Mm,
And I was starting to have a lot of these same kind of like fantastical visions and things that he started to have.
yeah,
But a lot of the times, like whenever he got too much in the spiritual, it became ungrounded at times to where it kind of scared my family.
right.
So she was afraid that I was getting into this territory that was becoming ungrounded.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of scared me because I was in that situation where it's like, okay, where is the line between like reality and the paranormal? Because a lot of paranormal things are starting to
Yeah,
happen.
yeah,
And I'm like, I know I'm not crazy because I'm questioning myself. Like a quote unquote crazy person wouldn't question if they were.
yeah.
So those are the very beginnings as to how I started on this path. And it felt like anytime I would stray away from it, it felt like it kept following me. It was always in the corner of my mind. Like
Mm-hmm.
anytime I would try to follow the path of the mundane, I would even in college, I was giving readings more than I was doing my homework. I
Right.
was
That felt natural. Yeah.
studying astrology more than I should have been reading for class.
Mm-hmm. It's more
And
interesting.
even in how all of Filipina Brujas started, I was
Huh?
giving readings more than I was looking for auditions in LA in 2020. And that's whenever someone said, "Hey, you know what? You should start charging more."
Mm.
And whenever other clients keep telling you, like, this is the same stuff me and my therapist discuss, and you're better than my therapist, that hits you in a certain
Mm.
way. That
Yeah.
hits you. And I said, I don't want to be causing harm to people, but if people are regarding me this highly, I feel like I should do my due diligence and learn how to protect myself and protect others because I don't want to get into a place of getting into my own ego
Yeah.
and doing things out of a place of making myself feel better
Yeah.
in order to get like as I'm giving people readings. So that's why I've taken so many breaks along this way is to
Yeah.
make sure I'm continually checking myself and checking my energy. And so those are those are all the little things in the way. But yeah, like 2020 was a huge time that
Mm-hmm.
started all of this that really catapulted everything.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh man, there's like five things I want to like touch on because you brought up 2020. Like people who've listened to this podcast, I brought up 2020 was I called it the magical mystery tour, or Jason and I, my husband, called it the magical mystery tour because like things blew up in 2020 on a mystical
It felt
everything
like the
sense for us.
60s.
Yes.
In a way, like I tuned in and I turn up, tune in, drop out, whatever
Yes, that's
Timothy Leary
100%.
said. I just dropped out in a way. Like I thought I was on this path. Had my agent, was an actor, and I was like, why am I doing this? I
Hmm.
I don't want to play this game anymore. I
Yeah.
don't want to have to compromise my morals and my values, and I don't want to have to keep schmoozing. I don't like
Ugh.
this.
I go, bleh. Yeah, I cannot. Oh gosh. Yeah, one of the things when you're talking is something I'm looking into as well because you talked about looking at all the different sort of spiritual paths like Buddhism or the different paths that you listed. And I was like, why is it, and we've talked a few times before, and every time we talk, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this and this and this, like
Yeah.
it just lines up. Um, but there is something about um, Filipinos being very syncretic in their spirituality, which means like we've taken on like a lot of different things. We're kind of like that sounds good. It kind of lines up with what we're doing over here. We'll take it. It's kind of what we do. I'm reading all these books about like the ancient ancient Filipino religions and like different practices. And it's like, yeah, that's why Catholicism was able to take a hold because they were like, yeah, that kind of already looks like what we were already doing here. So that's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, like boom, it works. Um, so I just think that and I'm trying to figure it out, honestly. I'm trying to put it together. There is something there that's really special, I think. It seems kind of to probably a Western linear time kind of mind. It seems a little like all over the place, but I think there's something really good in that mindset of the Filipino indigenous thinking of spirituality that I really like.
Even with my recent Filipino mentor,
Yeah.
that's I feel like he captures so much of just the inherent Filipino like oneness. He said, "Oh,
Mm.
yeah, just feel so open,
Mm-hmm.
just so incredibly open." Like, because my Western mind is saying, well, if you look at the Philippines on a map, you'll see how it's surrounded by all these different countries. So it
Yeah.
makes sense how way before the Spanish came in, there was all this different trade going on with
Mm-hmm.
like with the Indian religion and with there's also like Islam
Mm-hmm.
tied into a lot, like I think like the southern part of the
Yeah.
Philippines. My brain is farting right now.
It's a lot to think about.
It is because we have like we even with Lunar New Year, I grew up hearing Gong Hai Pachoy. Like I grew up hearing like Happy Chinese New Year growing up, and
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, are we? And then there's so much like as like being in that little section of the like in the Philippines, like being that country and having so much influence. It's like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I start to forget, like, and being in America, I start to forget, like, wait, like I feel like some Filipino Americans go like, "Wait, are we Chinese? Like, what is this?" Because I mean, there are like Filipino Chinese
Yeah.
people, but we're just surrounded by so much, and we are just this wonderful mix of so
Mm-hmm.
many. And I think maybe that's the reason why in my past life decided to be reincarnated into into a Filipino soul because
Yeah.
we just have so much of like everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that oneness of that animism of
Yes.
like, okay, well this works. Like, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
It's very fluid. There's so much
Mm-hmm.
fluidity within and so much respect to the elements. And I think whenever those elements are disrespected,
Yes. Clearly.
there's such this, and it was Professor Dr. Dan. Oh my gosh, forgive me for me mispronouncing her name because Don Mabalon. She's very well known within the historical, like documenting Filipino American history.
Mm.
California. She's written so much great stuff, but that was her how she described it. My friend was telling me about a class that she had lectured, and she had mentioned, I'm gonna butcher this because she explained it so much more better, so much better than I can right now, about how all the supernatural, like the paranormal, supernatural occurrences, these creatures that come out, the aswang and the tikbalang and tiyanak, whatever, all of these monsters is the land fighting back to get
Mm.
us to remember who we are.
Oof. That's cool. I really like
So
thinking about that.
it's like, why? And then I'm thinking about like from a trauma based perspective. I'm like,
Right.
why is fear and guilt being used?
I know. I don't,
Not
yeah.
being used, but why is like guilt and fear such like an emotion that's like ingrained within our culture to get us to do things, to get
Mm.
us to move, to get us to remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe we need to figure out a different different emotion to capitalize on, I suppose. Um, But
That's
interesting.
another rabbit hole
Oh my
in
gosh, for
Filipino
sure.
trauma for a
Oh
different.
my God. Yeah, that could be for many days of talking about that. Um, and yeah, and there was another thing too that when you were talking, it doesn't sound exactly like this, but I just read Dara Mason. He's Irish. He's a photographer, but he also hosts a really great podcast. Everybody should check it out. It's The Spirit Box. But he wrote a book recently called The Song of the Dark Man. And it was about something I had never experienced, but apparently this happens to a lot of people across um, different, you know, ethnicities or whatever. But mainly it's this experience of this figure of the dark man kind of freaks you out, maybe even causes some near death experience situations to happen to shake you up, to kind of get you to wake up out of like your mundane life. And a lot of times that path sets you on a path of, at least Indira's like his looking at it and talking to quite a few people who've had the experience, that sets you on a path on witchcraft, on becoming a witch, and you know, really working strongly with the dark man and all of that, whatever that entails. Um, so yeah, so I thought it when you were talking, I was like, oh, it kind of sounds like like a very initiatory situation. Maybe not necessarily like the dark man, but definitely some sort of initiatory process you were going through in your 20s. Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. No, because I swear, during that time, I was seeing the Hat Man, and I'm like, "Who is
The
this?" I
Hat
haven't
Man.
even taken NyQuil or anything. I was in my little dorm room.
Oh God.
I just kept feeling this, like, I was just talking about this with somebody today. I remember asking someone because he stayed in my same room when I was married. I was like, "Did anything weird happen to you there?" And he goes, "No, no." And I said, "Well, someone did pass away there." And he goes, "Yeah, yeah, I never felt anything." But I was seeing like Santa Muerte, like she was coming to me. I had accidentally opened up a portal. And
Mm.
another thing I've always wanted to say to young witches is never open up a silver raven wolf book, because the teen witch book, because she teaches you how to open circles, but she
Oh,
does, like Raymond Buckland in that book of witchcraft, he says, do not do XYZ because this will happen. She doesn't have any of those disclaimers in her book.
oh no.
I'm in a tangent right now. But,
It's okay.
but
No,
I'm
bring
just
it.
like,
Yeah.
in the podcast, like anyone who's listening to this, please heed my warning. I've been wanting to
Yes.
make TikTok videos about this for all the young people out there. And this
Yeah.
is how I had to learn the hard way. I had like accidentally, I followed her instructions. You're not supposed to break the circle. Never break the circle.
Oh.
Do not ever, ever, ever. You know what happens to you? Do you know what happens?
No.
Do not learn. Do not learn from learn from my mistakes. Do not. I had opened things I didn't know how to close. There was some leak
Mm.
within the spiritual fabric of time and space. Things are starting to come through. I would keep cleansing things. Things weren't going back to where they were supposed to.
Mm.
I was walking through portals like it felt like every day. Every time I would walk through a pathway, like it would felt like a magnet going through
Oh,
my head.
yeah.
And like Raymond Buckland, he explains that in his book. He explains it to the T. I just have so much beef towards her. If Silver Ravenwolf, if you're listening to this right now, I need some compensation for that time in my life. It was for weeks. It was for weeks where I was like,
Oh,
but I think that was the pivotal time. I was thinking, oh shit, what I'm doing is real.
yeah.
Like this witchcraft shit is real.
Oh, yeah.
Like I experienced creating a huge magnetic force. Like it was like I had stepped out of the circle and it felt like my body was going through like a magnet of some
Mm-hmm.
kind.
Yeah.
And then me coming in, it felt like, oh, it felt like my crown was just like fizzly and like not completely there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Dang.
yeah. So I just did not know how to protect myself.
Oh my gosh. So is it, so
Sometimes.
to be fair, I only know a Silver Raven Wolf like tangentially. I know who she is. I've never read her books. So is it that she taught you how to open portals but not how to close them?
She
Is that
taught you how to open and close, like how to open a circle and how to close a circle, but she
okay?
never said, warning, do not leave. Because I think she probably made or wrote that book for people who probably didn't have any power or didn't know what they were doing.
Oh,
Because I feel like if you do have some kind of inherent power in you, like, I think maybe if I didn't have anything within me, or maybe if I didn't call upon anything, I don't know, maybe, like, I wouldn't have experienced that. But,
yeah.
yeah, there just weren't the only disclaimers in that book were, "Don't drink or do drugs, kids.
Oh
Don't
gosh.
cheat on tests." Like,
Like,
stuff like
don't
that.
cheat on tests.
I'm I'm here, a little 19, 20-year-old reading this book
hmm
in my college dorm room, summoning who knows what.
So do you feel like the disclaimer should have been, because it sounds like, because you're so sensitive that you were just sensing all of that energy coming through. Now, maybe somebody who isn't as sensitive or aware, maybe they would just be like, whatever, like I opened and closed the portal, no big deal, and just go about their day. But you would notice those shifts. Is that
Mhm.
what kind of was going on?
Honestly, yeah, for someone who that for the person who's the latter that you're speaking of, I
hmm
those people aren't aligned frequently in their frequency.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you were in it, if you were in tune with the elements
Yeah.
and concentrating, like, you I feel like that person where I was, where there's all that emotion involved
hmm
in that desperation and, like, "Oh, I want this to happen," rather than someone who's like, "Ah, whatever, it's a little Ouija board, nothing's gonna happen." Then, of
Yeah.
course, like, that person who's like, because there are some people who are called nulls, who are like,
Mm.
magic deactivates around them.
Mm.
There are people who are activators and people who are nulls. I think I am very much an activator,
Yeah, sounds like
and
it.
yes. And so I think a null person's frequency probably isn't going to open that. So
Mm.
there are probably a lot of people in the mundane that are very much in that, like, null-like state, and that there's not an issue with that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think we need those people around.
yeah. They're good. They're grounded, super grounded. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Every time you say something, I'm like, oh yeah, it makes me think of something. Because definitely in my magical practice, which really did start in 2020. I did a lot of other spiritual work many, many years before that, but as far as like actually practicing magic, it wasn't started in 2020. And I would go onto my magical uh chat rooms and be like, hey guys, are you experiencing this when you're doing this? And they're like, no, not really. I just do the spell and kind of walk off, I do the thing and I go about my day. And I'm like, oh, okay. Cause I would be having like beings like in the room, that kind of
Oh.
stuff. Right. So it's like I would feel things in the room and I would notice things communicating with me. And I'm like, is anybody else like having this? And some people would say, yeah, kind of, but a lot of times it was like, no, not really. I don't notice anything. And I was like, so yeah, I think what you're saying is like, it's no better or worse. It just means that, you just have access to more information that's headed like in the room, in the
Yeah,
space.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's so many times where I'm like, "Oh, I wish I was just shut off." And
Right. Like,
after some pretty traumatic things that happened, I think I eventually there was a phase where I did learn how to turn it off,
hmm
and that was the phase where I stopped doing readings for
right. Yeah.
for myself.
Yeah.
But I needed to, because I remember I was seeing too much, and my mom was saying, like, "Well, maybe it's the tarot readings that you're doing," and I said,
I know.
"No, it's not. You don't know what you're talking about." And I think, like, after I cried about it,
You're like, oh, wait, maybe she's right.
after I cried about it, like the things stopped happening. So I'm like, oh, what's going on? But that's like another, yeah,
Yeah.
that's another story.
Yeah, because when you're doing readings, at least, when I do readings, it is you are like basically opening up your aura and and the other person, you know, they're in a permission state. We're all, giving and consent and permission to like kind of get into each other's auras. And so in that sort of open state, like stuff can get in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah. So like
fascinating.
definitely I wasn't sure if I was learning how to close things every
Hmm.
time. There's a lot of like spiritual responsibility, a lot of like spiritual
Hmm.
hygiene
Yeah.
type things that it's like it's and just especially in the neurodivergent nature of being neurodiverse. It's like sometimes we don't always like do things.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's why I have the checklists.
Sometimes I need to like pull up my corners a little bit. I'll just bring it away. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. And then come like Sunday morning, and I'm just like, oh, I can't move.
Wiped out. Like,
I can't move. Can't do anything right now. Can I take a quick 1 minute break just
oh
to get some
yes.
honey for my throat?
Oh yes, go for it.
Okay, I'll be right.
Boop, boop. Right, we're back. Oh yes, everyone, Michelle has like sinus infection. You couldn't tell because she looks beautiful and lively, but we're doing what we can.
The Casual Temple podcast is sponsored by Wild Honeybee Texas Farms.
Yes, there you
Oh my
go.
gosh, this is why influencers have to do the hand thing for the
Yeah,
filter.
get it to focus.
Yes, I have been fighting a sinus infection, as we have
Yes.
had spoken about.
Yeah.
I don't know if this happens to anyone else. Just after doing clearings or after doing some spell workings, I've had the pattern of getting physically ill after
Mm-hmm.
doing some of those.
Mm-hmm.
But also,
Yep.
it's like the weather changes too. The weather changes in Texas. Like we had like historic snow
Oh,
last
that's
week, and we
right.
hadn't had like that amount of snow since like 1960 something. So it's a big deal. Like people didn't know how to act. Everyone
Right.
was outside, and they're like, we don't have sleds here, so people would like take
Trash
Tupperware
cans.
containers, yeah, and it
Dude,
would slide down the hills.
I love it.
It was so funny.
That is hilarious. I love it. We're gonna have some fun in the snow, god darn it. But, oh gosh. Yeah, I definitely that was something I learned too early on. I would do a lot of magic. Like the very first Halloween in 2020, I did so much stuff that day. I was literally laid out, no joke, for like a week. I couldn't do anything. A week from just doing so much stuff on one day. And then I was like, what's going on? And then some folks are like, well, that stuff really drains you. And I was like, it does? It does? Like, yeah, you gotta like really take care, like do a lot of grounding, you gotta like eat grounding food like potatoes or whatever, just to get you like back in because that it'll really sap your system. I was like, oh,
Right. Oh
ah,
my gosh. The nutrition and all
yes, the
that stuff.
nutrition.
So oh my gosh. Okay, I just getting back from a doctor's appointment today
Hmm.
and just thinking about all of those things, and like I know my sinus infection thing is like I'm
Right.
like, well, spiritual significance of sinus
Yep.
infection.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I have been like I tend to go from like 0 to 100 too much, and I know like we're in this cycle of rest, of
Mm.
restoration, of
Yeah.
so I've been keeping that in mind,
Right.
and
Yeah.
just there is so and even like with the like this spell that I was doing, I was noticing that like my candle was getting enveloped. And a few astrologers have also like confirmed this about like my aura and my energy, and other readers,
Mm.
that my aura tends to soak up a lot of, it's weird, I feel like I can like read the evil eye on a
Oh.
lot of different types of people, and I can feel like a lot of people's insecurities and all those things. So I
Hmm.
tend to soak up and it also sucks, like, working at a hospital too.
Oh my God.
It was it was so bad, like, I was in a patient's room, and I was started to kind of I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm getting nauseous." It's
Yeah.
but I can, like I will tend to absorb, like, I will soak up, like, people's energy like a sponge, and I'm still in
Hmm.
that process of learning, like, "Okay, how do I
Let it go.
completely clear and let all that go after?" Because
Yeah.
I'm also having to see so many patients in a day, and also, another thing that I didn't know that I was prepared for, that I will, like I think coming from a funeral home prepared me for what I do now, like, hospitals see more death than the inside of a funeral home, I will
That's
say
so
that.
true.
Like, you are experiencing so much more death, like, rather like, I was working in a funeral home, you get, like, 1 to 3 people, like, a day, and you're, like, taking care of but you're not, like, seeing the trauma that happens right before
Right.
passing, and sometimes you see, like, multiple people, like, just pass constantly
God.
within the
Yeah.
span of a week, and so
Oof.
that's, like, a whole different beast that I feel like
Hmm.
I'm learning how to I feel like spirit put me through that trial of, like, working in a funeral home first to, like, prepare me for just this high acuity type
Hmm.
setting, and they were teaching and I was a person who didn't go to mass before that, but I was like, "This is a way for me to cleanse myself," because I am, like in a church, when the singing, the frequency cleanses me,
Yeah.
the incense and the holy water and the candles are there. And so as I leave, I feel like I'm getting a balance of all of the elements, and
Hmm.
I leave the dead spirits and the dead energy there,
Yeah.
and I come out just, like, refreshed.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, amazing. Oh God. Yeah, there's
Mhm.
so much. I always think I've been thinking about that lately too about hospitals. It's like, man, they need to I know like not everybody does the sage, right? Or whatever, but they do a lot of like energy cleansing and no joke in the hospitals and like the people that work there. Anyway, like y'all we all gotta like clear out all that energy. It's a lot.
Right, right, and there's so much of, like, so much, like, research and things I wanna read about, like, how just so much of our culture is so rooted in healing,
Yeah,
like, how so much of our labor force is taking care of other people.
that's right.
Either you're a caregiver or
Hmm.
you're a nurse or
Yeah.
you're, um, I was gonna say you're a oh, the way I was gonna say helotician, but I was that's not a
Oh,
word.
heloptician. Right. A
You're a
heloptician.
practice helot.
Yeah. Yes. Oh gosh. Let's see, did I? Oh, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, it said it. Anyway, I muted and then it said I was muted when I unmuted. So just checking on that. Oh gosh. So kind of into that. So yeah, Filipino people are known for their caregiving as nurses around the world. Um, but how does, in your spiritual search, how is being part of the Filipino diaspora how's that shaped where you've been moving on your path?
Mhm. Can we pause for another minute?
Yes.
I need to pee.
Oh yeah, you should
Okay,
do
I'm
that.
back.
Back in there. Yay. Okay. Oh, so the question was,
Yes, in
now
the
that we're
diaspora.
refreshed,
Yeah.
about the how has being part of the Filipino diaspora, how has that shaped your search on the spiritual path?
It's become definitely so much more eclectic.
Yeah.
It's a lot more generalized than specialized, and I was feeling a lot of that, like, just being in a different land from where your people are from. You get in touch with a lot of the native energy, and
Hmm.
just being in the South, in the bayou, you get there's so much history here. Just being close to Galveston, like, Galveston is where Juneteenth originated,
That's right.
and
Yeah.
so I was just feeling the energy last night as I was, like, walking through different crossroads, and I was like, "Whoa." I am feeling a lot of like Southern influence, like
Mm.
a lot of the, a lot of, um, my brain is trying to figure out the words right now. I hope the pauses are cut out.
No, it's fine. Pauses are healthy, people. That's what I think.
A lot of the culture, like a lot of Southern American Black culture
Hmm.
within, like, my brain was pausing there because I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many different like regions within the South, like which, like, what are the exact parts I'm trying to pinpoint right now, because there's like the voodoo influence, like the New Orleans voodoo influence. There's
Mm.
like a lot of Ifa influences. There's so much. There's so much like the Karankawa influences and all those things. And being here, it's made it like it's so rich. It's so rich, but also like if you I feel like just being in the diaspora, there's so much like looking outside of ourselves.
Mm.
There was I also got into this space of I felt like I was looking so much outside of myself for guidance that I forgot to look within. And
Mm.
I
Mm.
forgot that there's so much within my own history that I should be looking towards. But I think part of why I ended up learning so much about the culture here is because I have to learn what plants I'm working with, what plants are native, what waters are native here, how I need to learn how to interact with the land here, even though it's not my own land.
Hmm.
And so I feel like there's a different like frequency that I feel like I have to go through to get in touch with, because I'm not necessarily like from this land. I'm more of like a cousin,
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
like this is water, this is Galveston, but it's like it's not my water, it's not the Pacific.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so it's given me more of like, I guess it's like what, like whenever you're in school and then you have to like take Spanish and like you learn how to speak Spanish. It's a lot of like it's a lot of like that. Yeah, and then also just being close to Mexico, I am getting a
Yeah.
lot of Mexican influence. So I'm
Yeah.
in here in Texas, I'm getting all of this different southern richness here.
Hmm.
There's a lot of like Mexican Catholic influence that I also
Hmm.
get here.
Yeah.
And so being in the diaspora, it's like I could say I'm like the one of very like few people. Like I could be like I'm the Filipino witch from the bayou.
Right.
I'm from
Right.
I'm from the muddy swamp deep down south. And so there's a lot of that difference that I feel like I get here specifically compared to if I were like living in California or living in New York. I
Hmm.
think there's parts of the land I've learned how to navigate just being here.
Yeah.
But also it can also get kind of isolating because there's not as much community. And so that's something that being in the diaspora has how it's shaped me. It's taught me the importance of what having like my own the importance of what having my own community like means.
Yeah.
And the thing I wanted to initiate coming into this year was I know there are other Filipinos out here like in Houston,
Yeah.
and I kind of like I would look to like Filipinos like in California or New York, and I'm like, oh man, you'll have such a community there. It's so it can feel very isolating here because
Yeah.
there are, even though Houston is so diverse and it's like the second most diverse city in the nation, it's also the most segregated.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, that's kind of yeah, it's definitely kind of a lot. And especially when you're going through um sort of spiritual stuff, I feel like I've been in, okay, I'm not going to throw any shade. I'm going to throw a little bit of shade, but not too much shade.
Mhm.
So, my sister and I went to in August, or I'm sure you probably heard about it, but the Center for Babylon Studies
Oh
had
yeah,
like
I've
the
always wanted
gathering.
to
It's
go.
super good. Like it was really fun. So the shade isn't about like that. I think it was more around, I think it's more around sort of the, because it was great meeting a bunch of Filipino people like my age, right? Like I've only really
Mm.
known my mom and like her friends. But it was really cool being around Filipinos my age. But the thing was, there was sort of touches on spirituality, but
Mm.
it kind of touched it, but it didn't really go very deep.
Oh,
And yeah, and my sister was, my sister is, we're both kind of very into like the things that are happening to us.
yeah.
And we would share like, yeah, there's like, we're having this visitations by our ancestors. Da, 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 and people would be like, oh, interesting. And just
What?
kind of move along. So it's like, again, it's that situation where it's like some people are having these experiences, but some people are not, or a lot of people aren't, or they're not aware they're having it. And you know what I mean? So it was like, oh, this isn't really a space to talk about that kind of thing, you know?
That's so surprising.
Yeah, isn't it?
And that makes me feel
I
disappointed.
know. Well, I know.
Yeah.
I know. That's my sister and I.
Exposed.
No, no, like it was a
Toxic spiritual spaces. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
um it was still a really cool, wonderful experience, and I'd probably go again. It just wasn't what we thought. Like she and I thought it was going to be. It just kind of was more textbook. I don't even know why that is the word, but it was
Was
like
it
a
like
textbook.
I'm interested to know like how textbook what aspects did they dive into?
Well, the actual talks were about animism, right? And that the talks were actually the thing I loved the most was like people speaking, because Lane was there, Lane Wilkin, to talk about Batok. And and I was like, wow, he's like, I was like, yes, like what he's talking about, yes, all about it or whatever. But he was like one of a few, couple speakers that I was like, oh yeah, I think this person has had experiences, you know, and understands that particular piece, which is what, my sister and I and you like are going through like the spiritual stuff, and you're in a culture where it's not talked about, and you're told you're crazy or you're having a psychosis, all these things. So, but you're not, right? Like I know
Mhm.
I'm not. Like I can live my life. I have relationships. It's not like everything's going to hell. It's just like I know what is happening is happening. And I would love to have like a larger community to talk about that, because I do feel like it is probably more prevalent than we're aware. It's just we don't understand what's happening or we ignore it, right? Until they
Yeah.
come at you, and then they just will not leave you alone. And so you have to address them.
That's exactly what happened on my 20th birthday.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly what
Yes. The ancestors come knocking. You gotta pay attention.
I swear. I
Yeah.
swear. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But
Um,
I think they do a good job of trying not to scare me. So
that's
they're
good. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
they try to be subtle.
Be subtle. Yeah. I basically told them, do not frighten me. I don't want to see you. I can't. Like, I literally don't want to see you. You can give me messages and stuff, but I cannot see you. Yeah. It's too funny. So kind of on that, because we were talking about like in our previous conversation, we did talk about sort of like the indigenous ways of being is sometimes labeled as a psychosis,
Yes.
right?
And I think part of that, okay, so talking to my therapist who has her PhD and is a witch, is out of the broom closet, practicing pagan, she's like, oh my gosh, so many great things that she's talked about. And she was saying, like, magic does not replace a PhD.
Hmm.
So
Right.
these terms that have been popularized, like spiritual psychosis, are colonized terms. Why should someone be shamed for not wanting to participate within society? Why should someone be shamed for their realizations of not wanting to be in this westernized mode of being anymore?
Yeah.
And I think part of what's going on is you have a lot of these influencers talking about like, oh, the star seeds and the 444 means this, and I'm from the constellation Arcturus and da 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 da. And I always felt this weird disconnection from a lot of that, but I
Hmm.
also had that weird feeling of like, you know what, as a kid, I did feel this like extraterrestrial connection.
Yeah.
But something that she mentioned with a lot of those influencers, she said, Michelle, those influencers that are saying all those things, all those white influencers, they do not have a spiritual culture. They are trying to create their own spiritual culture because they want to belong and because they need to attach to something.
Mm.
They need attention.
Hmm.
And so a lot of them will say and do a lot of these things, and it'll get labeled as a spiritual psychosis.
Right.
And I definitely need to have another session with her because she said that she gave me permission to record our session, so I definitely want to record that with her and
Mm.
talk discuss that with her so I can post it on my platform because she
Yeah.
explains it in such an informed way because
Hmm.
she's also in this space because I've had that fear so many times. I'm like, Doc, am I going crazy?
Yes.
Am
Yeah,
I
for
going
sure.
crazy? Like, did I get possessed? Like, do I have schizophrenia? And she was like, no, no, stop diagnosing yourself. You're still in school. I have my PhD. You're still getting your master's. You weren't possessed. She's like, you weren't possessed, Michelle. You were just rode by a spirit. Do you know what that is? Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay. I see.
Right.
And so anything that's seen as, of course, anything that's seen opposed to the mainstream, anything that's contrary to that, it's going to be seen as something psychotic.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
can see that, I guess, in some contexts, it may be seen as psychosis or psychotic. Like if a person has a family, wife, and kids and decides to like abandon them, then I
Right.
guess that may be something that's like a more clinical type of discussion that we can have.
Right.
But as part of like a psychosis, that's that's kind of shaky territory that I feel like a professional would have to label and discuss. And
Hmm.
so I think that term of like spiritual psychosis just being thrown around so
Right.
willy-nilly, that's a part of the conversation of, okay, we need to stop throwing around like autism and ADD around like so willy-nilly,
Hmm.
because now everyone's starting to throw, oh, that person has spiritual psychosis, or oh, that, but we don't, being outside of that context of not knowing the culture, like we don't know like, oh, this person is going through something more personal than
Mm.
my own understanding of it, because
Yeah.
someone outside of the culture is witnessing someone get rode by a spirit. I feel like that's, there's definitely going to be that disconnect.
Yeah.
Someone who is not informed in indigenous spiritual practice and is going to try to diagnose someone having something spiritual happen to them, of course they're not going to be culturally informed. And we also talk
Yeah.
about this in school too. The schizotypical, some people will diagnose, oh, that's schizotypical schizotypal da 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 da, because that's magical thinking and magical beliefs. And I did have a professor say, like, I would be very careful about diagnosing someone in this way, because I do believe, like, there are a lot of spiritual beliefs and spiritual practices in different cultures where this is, like, there are shamans out there
Yeah.
who can do some shit. So
Yeah. That's what they do. And for you, it seems like, you were explaining how your mom and your aunt were like seeing what was going on with you, and they were like, "Oh, it seems like this is something that your grandfather was experiencing or is, right?" So at least they could tie that to like you have these like shaman spiritual things like your granddad does. At least you had that. Um, so that is always a positive. You weren't, you didn't necessarily get diagnosed out, it within your family. They could kind of see what was going on with you.
like if it was someone else who didn't have that spiritual backing, they would have easily said, like, oh, brief psychotic disorder, brief
Right.
psychosis disorder.
Yeah.
But having to translate that, I'm also like in this point where I guess I've been trying to do this research for the past like 3 years, because there's like so much, like, in Latin American culture, like there's so many like studies and papers out there about like curantis, forgive my pronunciation, curantismo as a means of healing. um Basically a lot of indigenous ways of being with evidence-based practice, and where that aligns, and how healers can be within the process of someone's healing,
Mm,
how they can aid and be helpful in like an integrated form of healing.
right.
And that's a lot of the research that we're doing this semester, I think. Yeah. Yeah. That deep sigh, because I'm thinking about all the papers I'm
You're like,
already.
uh.
Because of because of my sinus infection, I had to like postpone a meeting that I had with my professor.
Oh,
Because I was, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I guess my sinus infection is saving me, because I had to,
right.
yeah, I had to present like 8 articles to him, and I just like was in the process of getting that done. It just like hasn't been fully complete yet.
Right. You're like, sorry.
It's hard to find, like, the research is so like the type of research that I have to find is like so specific, and I
Hmm.
kind of went down a rabbit hole of like the Asian baby girl through a Filipino American lens. What the
Right.
And I ended up like spending, because I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. Oh wait, okay, my
Oh, wait,
research.
hold on. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. I love those rabbit holes though. Um, yeah, I was I'm sure you've read or at least know the book Way of the Ancient Healer by Virgil
Yes.
Mayros
Oh
Postal.
my gosh, I've yet to finish that book.
Oh yeah, it's so good. Like I started it last year and I didn't anyway, I started it and for whatever reason I put it back down and then I picked it up literally a month ago and I read the whole thing. I'm like, it's amazing. Virgil, amazing. Um, well, one of the things he mentioned, because a lot of it is about what we're talking about, like kind of indigenous spirituality in relation to the Filipinos. Obviously, there's the healing element. One of the things he said that was really fascinating, he said a lot of times the healers in the Philippines would tell a story or sing a song before they do the healing about another person or like a folk tale of a person receiving the healing and being healed. And then he was like, well, that sets somebody up, it's like it sets somebody up emotionally, mentally, spiritually, that they too will be healed. Right. And so I was like, oh, that's so cool to think about. Like you tell somebody a story about somebody being healed from the ailment that they have. I could definitely at least set you up to be healed. You know what I mean? Um, thought that was so cool. Something you said made me think about that. So that was really interesting.
Oh man, I'm gonna close my other tabs right now,
Oh,
because my connection kind of like did
oh,
something. It paused in the middle of your
oh, sure.
sentence. So
No
I
worries.
caught the last part of your sentence.
Okay.
So But I don't want to make you. Oh man, my thing is freezing. Am I freezing?
Oh, no, I see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess it's just my connection then. Oh,
Keep it alive. Mercury, Hermes, keep it alive. Um,
Mercury, Mercury, help us.
but I'm happy to repeat it. It was just basically Virgil told, or he was talking about how the healers in the Philippines would either sing a song or tell a story before the healing to the person about another person who received a healing and they were healed. So it like sets you up to like receive the healing, which I thought was a really cool thing. So yeah,
Oh, that's so nice. Wow.
yes. Um,
It's almost like shifting like your brain into like that frequency. It's like
exactly.
feels like an artistic meditation.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, that's so cool to think about, like something to, comprehend on the future of, medicine. Uh, is to tell some stories and sing some songs. Um, but yeah, okay, definitely want to get into because I know we talked about sort of, what was going on with you being involved with this particular spiritual group that turned toxic. So I'll let you kind of jump wherever you want into the story of that, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like going into that, I'm also trying to, man, Mercury, the words, I'm trying to spit the words out because I think I'm also like in a way too. It's like the people pleasing tendencies in
Mm,
me right now are like also wanting to give this group grace because in my mind, I'm like, maybe that intention isn't known from
mm,
that organization's end. They are, maybe they do have good intentions, and maybe the negative intentions are some things that have yet to be discovered on their end.
mm,
Um, because inherently the mission feel negative. And oh my gosh, I want my network says it's unstable. Am I still
I can still hear
can
you, but I can pause if we need to pause for a moment. You want to check your network.
okay.
The record. We're back.
Okay. We are back and maybe their spirits don't want me to talk about some things
Mm-hmm.
mysterious on this new Aquarius moon. But I guess things that are done in the dark will come to light.
Mm-hmm.
And I was feeling like I had a lot of different suspicions about what was going on. And I decided to go outside of that community. And little things started to happen to confirm suspicions that I was having.
Mm-hmm.
There was a girl who was needing help on the side of the road. And I decided to go stop and help her. Something in my gut just said, you need to help her out. And I instantly felt some kind of spiritual connection to her.
Mm,
And she was talking about like her Iya and her Ile, like, and I don't out of nowhere because we just both felt it. And she's like, "Oh, I named my car Ogun." And I said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Okay, your car needs a cleansing. Like, let me get
mm,
my spray out. Like, I'll try to just do a little bit of cleansing on your car."
mm-hmm.
And she goes, "Wait, you're spiritual too?" And I go, "Yeah, yeah. Like you mentioned your car's name is Ogun. Like, are you in an Ile? Like, what do you practice? Like, who's over your head? This and that." And she's like, "Oh, I'm with this Ile." And I was like, "Oh, I'm with this Ile." And she goes, "Oh, I heard a lot of things about about them. I
Uh-oh.
heard that so and so is manipulative and that so and so is involved with like this thing and that thing." And being in that house, I know that it was said like, oh, people will say this and this about us, but they don't understand.
Mm.
But if more and more people keep confirming weird gut feelings that I'm having, then I can't keep ignoring this gut feeling that I'm having.
Right.
And so I try to think about what she says, and we kept in touch. Like, we ended up just talking and processing more the next day. I helped her get her car out of that ditch that she was stuck
Oh,
in.
nice.
And I end up talking to I was in another spiritual store in the area, and they start talking about some of these spiritual people. And I go, "What? Oh my gosh, like what did so and so do? Oh, so and so did a working on me." And then I don't want to like give out real names.
Hmm.
Let's call them Martin.
Hmm.
Martin, sitting on the bench, goes, "These I've spoken to multiple workers and psychics. These people have no power. I ended up reversing the working done in the graveyard off of Danny. And Danny was the one going, Danny had never met some of these people before. There's so much spiritual drama that happens in the Houston spiritual community. And so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm so afraid of like the backlash. So that's why it's also been like taking me a year to even come out
Hmm.
and talk about a lot of these things. Danny talked about their experiences with feeling very ill, and a
Mm.
doctor had asked them if they were poisoned. Danny ended up seeking out Martin's help, and Martin had after a few sessions, lifted that working off of Danny.
Mm.
And I said, Martin, I need to talk to you about some things because I just need to get things confirmed. After an initial reading, Martin says, they've placed a poppet on you. They've done a working on you. They put a root on you.
Hmm.
And I said, really? And Martin said, yes. They are just going to keep reaching out to you because they want your money and your energy.
Hmm.
And I kept feeling that's how it was at the very beginning. Even though I felt all this good energy, there was this gut feeling that I had from the initial meeting of, okay, there's something with money here, but there's so much about Ifa that I want to learn because I want to learn how it relates within my own culture.
Hmm.
There's so many overlaps with the Filipino deities and with a lot of African deities. And something that multiple people close to me have felt from certain spiritual practitioners in the area. They say, oh, a lot of those deities that they're working with aren't the real ones. They are working with other spirits that have taken over.
Hmm.
And I kept feeling like I was recovering from some of uncomfortable positions that I was placed in.
Hmm.
And there was always this atmosphere of, if you feel like there's something going, like there was they were trying to have a system of like to resolve conflicts, or if anyone felt uncomfortable, things like that. But I don't know if the environment was safe enough for me to speak up,
Hmm.
even though there was a lot of emphasis placed on cultivating that safety. My best friend had mentioned a lot of times where she didn't feel safe, and I was under this glamour magic where I could not see that.
Mm.
And there were And even talking to my therapist, I was wondering, like, why did these spiritual people in place try to break me and my best friend up? And she said, Michelle, that's called triangulation. They were trying
Mm-hmm.
to manipulate you through triangulation. They said it didn't make sense. They kept saying that it was for our own spiritual growth and that we were distracting each other from being on our own paths. And I don't know why the subject of every time I would walk into the house, the first thing would always be about my relationship and why was I still with X, Y, and Z or hanging out with X, Y, and Z. The emphasis was on trying to separate me from people.
Mm.
And it felt like every time I was there, I kept feeling like there was this overarching, like there was like some kind of shadow, like
Mm-hmm.
hovering over some things. And I kept like hearing, like feeling some things in my ear, but I kept like, there was also that part of me that kept feeling like that guilt and that was being like controlled by that guilt and that shame that kept telling me I need to stay here. Like the spirits need me to stay here to do this and that and the third for them. It's like they were servants once too, so I also have to become a spiritual servant in this way.
Mm.
I kept feeling like there was something wrong because the knowledge that I would want to learn, it was just given out in breadcrumbs. And if you want to learn more knowledge, you have to pay more money to get to this level and this thing and that thing. And I understand with a lot of traditional practice, there is a lot of money involved. But there was such a change whenever I spoke to my Filipino mentor, and he said, do not worry about your ability to pay. At the end of the day, this is an energy exchange. There are monetary things that we can figure out in order to exchange. I don't want money to be the factor in as to why you can't learn about your own spiritual practice,
Mm-hmm.
your own culture's practices.
Mm-hmm.
And so after just feeling so off and isolated, and after taking like my time away, I realized, why is it that my finances and my own well-being, why is it that whenever I step away from the community, it becomes better? Have they been draining my energy in ways that I don't know? Have
Mm.
there been workings on me where I don't know that there have been workings on me to where they've needed me to stay in some way? And so once I started to take that year off last year, sit down, focus on myself, focus on school, shout out 4.0, focus on getting all those internships. I'm not necessarily saying like, okay, I didn't need them.
Right.
Maybe the relationship needs to be different to where it's not where I'm having to financially stress myself out.
Yeah.
And there were so many situations where it's like, well, there would be like, well, why didn't you do this, or why didn't you do that, or why didn't you speak about this? And then my therapist had mentioned, like, well, that's victim blaming. It doesn't matter like what you do or don't do. If there is some kind of outcome that happens that's not favorable to you, the blame is going to be placed on you. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
try to take the blame off of them. And I know I haven't spoken to some people, so I know that there's some people who have left.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just felt something weird in the back of my head. I don't know. I just felt some like airiness, and I'm like,
Mm.
um, I'm trying not to psych myself out too much right now.
Oh, well, just you can call your helpful guides and angels to help protect back there. Your ancestors.
Protect. I know Lola's here.
Yeah.
Lola's
Yeah,
here.
we'll take care of you.
They're they're here. they are here. And my therapist also has to like walk through things with me, and she's like, don't be afraid of, just don't be afraid.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to name names. This could be anyone in the community. This could
Right.
this could be whoever, but just
Mm,
as like a warning to people out there, like if there is something in your gut that is telling you that something is off,
mm-hmm.
then listen to that. And I'm not going to completely discredit like all the good things that did come out of it.
Right.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot. I This experience gave me a lot of just wisdom on
Yeah.
what does oh what does a community that's right, a community, I'm not going to say like what does a good or bad community look like. There's so much gray area. Community comes with conflict.
Yeah.
But a community that's right for you personally, like what does that look like?
Yeah.
And I know, even like sitting here, my people pleasing brain in the back of my mind and the insecurity is telling me like, oh, probably after, if they listen to this, they'll probably say like, whoa, it's because the trickster spirits like came after her because she's not of our lineage or not of the, like
Mm,
there's so much of that like going through my head right now, like, oh well,
yeah.
if she did these offerings, maybe she wouldn't be experiencing this, because that also like came through. And the point where I started to question things was I had a reading done, and I went I did things
Mm,
opposite of that reading, and the outcome came out completely different, completely 180. And I know humans are infallible, or fallible, sorry, vocabulary.
hmm.
Humans are fallible, and so
Yeah.
I that experience started to make me question, I the guidance I was looking for was too far outside of myself, and I needed to
Mm,
learn how to trust myself again.
yeah.
I needed to learn how to cultivate that safety within myself,
Yeah.
because my self-worth and my self-esteem was all over the place, to where I felt like I needed to depend on those outside of myself for that guidance. And I think part of that was going through all of these very polarizing spiritual experiences that made me feel like I needed to seek someone outside of myself,
Yeah.
when I should have sought out my current therapist. I should have sought her out first, because she has the PhD and she also has the spiritual experience, that
Hmm.
culturally experience. So I think I'm learning how to forgive myself for that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to learn how to see that not as a moral failing, but just as a reflection of society. Like I was going to all these different spiritual stores to try to talk to somebody to figure out what was going on inside of me. I didn't even think to look up psychology today, spiritual. I didn't think that there was going to be someone who was pagan who was a therapist.
Right.
I didn't know that, but listener, as a call, heed my words. There is somebody out there,
Yeah.
and I love her so much, and I wish I could tell all the witches out there to go to Dr. Tiff, Dr. Marie, but she is now retired. So I hope to one day become that witchy therapist for that person who was once like me. And
Oh,
my therapist did suggest, once I got licensed, like, you now have that experience. If you ever want to lead a group for survivors of cults, you could
yeah.
do that if you wanted to, because girl, you were in a cult and you survived it.
Yeah.
I know this group, they get a lot of, they're also very aware in that, like, oh, people call us a sex cult and call us like this and that. But what's the definition of a cult? Manipulation in order to gain members? I don't know.
Hmm.
and I know a lot of the vocabulary is skewed. I don't know. Remember whenever there were like all those like the network marketing, the forex groups, and the
Yeah.
things, yeah. So I feel like it was a lot of like similar kind of recruiting
Mm,
tactics like that. But I think there's an issue whenever a lot of your members are having to pay so much money, but they're also financially not in the best place. Like,
mm,
and I was, it just feels like a generational, I don't know. I know it's like a product of a lot of it. I can't. I'm also giving the group grace because I know like a lot of the things are like a product of the systems that we're living in. It's like,
mm,
yes, you want community and you want to cultivate these spaces, but also it's like that's why I stayed for so long, because I know you also have like a financial responsibility like to
mm.
yourself, but at what cost? Like when is it too much? When is, and like I know you said like money wasn't the main goal or the main purpose, but why why are my spirits saying opposite? Why is my gut saying the opposite?
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't even know. Trying to think. So one of the things that came to mind um is the idea of attention. I think we talked about this too in our previous one of our previous calls, but like there is something about getting a lot of people's attention on something that you want, right? Like say maybe something in the group that they were trying to accomplish. They were like even just you being there and applying attention on it, like that's a powerful thing. And so I'm wondering if maybe some of that was potentially going on too, where you were maybe having to participate.
So two people had mentioned this. They had
Yeah.
said they needed your power, they needed your energy,
Hmm.
because some people's gifts. Okay, I need to pee again. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I'm drinking so much water.
Boom. Right. Back. We're back. Um, what were we talking about? Let's see.
Yeah, yeah. Just about like,
Attention on
oh yes, what they needed. Yeah, because
hmm
I confirmed that there were like two people who like had confirmed that with me. Um, yeah, they something that this reader psychic had picked up on some of the members of this community is that their main gift was vampirism, and that they inherently had no power of their own, so they had to rely on newer, younger energy being involved in the space in order for them to gain their own energy. So they gained
mm,
energy from multiple people being there. Something my therapist said, yeah, that's why they recruited you, friend, because both of you are young.
right.
You are young and wanting to learn about things, and so you there was just more from those parties to gain from the both of you.
Yeah.
And thing that my therapist had mentioned was, I guess I wasn't aware of my own magic or my own energy, to
Hmm.
where once I stepped into the space, it probably felt very strong to them. And I think
Mm.
that was a big lesson in self-worth for me, because
Yeah.
I didn't even know I was underestimating my own abilities and my
Yeah.
own energy. And so another thing that I've learned about this is a lot of very powerful people don't have Instagram pages. A lot of very powerful people are
Under the radar kind of thing.
very under the radar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also I've learned a lot of very powerful, influential people tap into the darker side of
Yes.
magic for their congregants
Mm-hmm. Oh my
under the guise
gosh.
of being famous preacher, pastor people. But
Right. But that's such a story we should, like in America of those like famous preacher, pastor, especially you coming from
Mhm.
Texas, there's been quite a few famous like pastors from Texas. So that's interesting that you put it in those terms. Let's see.
And I am Joel Osteen's church is just a hop, skip, jump, and a step away from where I am. And I don't know, there's something in the water here.
Yeah, I think there's something in the water going on there. Oh man. But the way
Something
you
happening.
described them was interesting because when so you guys, if you do make a buttock appointment with Lane Wilkin, he's gonna tell you all about the Oswong. Okay. He does an Oswong test to see if you are an
Whoa.
Oswong.
What?
Yes, he does a test. He pokes you with a what is it, stingray barb to see if you are an Oswong. Um, and I was like, "Did you test me? Was I an Oswald?" Because I didn't even know it
Wait, has
happened.
he
He was
met
like,
one?
"Yeah." Right. Well, anyway. So he tested me. He's like, "Oh yeah, you're not an Oswald. You're good." And I was like, "Well, what is one? What is an Oswald?" So basically, what he described it is basically an energy vampire. So what you're saying this group was sounds like they operate like an energy vampire, like an Oswald, like a group of Oswald. So that was fascinating. Oh man, let's see.
Will he do the batok on someone who is?
Did I ask that question? Let me think.
Oh man.
I think he did. You know what? I don't want to speak out of turn. So this is a good question to ask him. I'm going to paraphrase.
Lane,
Lane,
please get on the next
I
interview.
don't let's say I did already interview Lane actually, but I didn't ask him about the ask one. I do believe everybody you can correct me. I'm happy to be wrong. I do believe he said he has tattooed somebody who was an aswang. It just might I think he has to do like clearing first, like an energy clearing, if I remember correctly. Happy to be corrected though.
Mm.
Yeah, so that was very fascinating. But so kind of the red flags that I heard, you can also correct me too if I didn't hear them correctly. The sort of the early ones maybe where like you just felt it. You felt that things were off and you chose to maybe not pay attention to them. So is that something that you would advise folks going forward? You're like, oh yeah.
If you have that gut feeling,
Hmm.
like everyone gets it,
Yeah.
when they're in that fight or flight, and you end up letting a situation go on for longer because. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry, my thing's freezing. If you, my arrowhead, hold on, my
Oh no.
sitting. Okay, because I feel like a lot of women tend to go through this. If you end a situation and you get that feeling in your stomach, but you want to people please by sticking around for
Yeah.
a little bit, take a step back, feel that feeling of where it is coming from.
Hmm.
Oh no, I'm frozen.
Oh, I
Who's
can
frozen?
hear you
Okay, it's
still.
back.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, feel that. Take a step back and pause.
Hmm.
Definitely pause. And don't try to force a square peg in a round hole. Do not try to shave it down. Do not try to force it in. just observe the feeling. And I know some people, it's like, oh, a lot of from the stories that I've heard from a lot of people when they've been in similar situations, they say like, oh, I kind of had that weird feeling, but I didn't want to piss them off, so I kept
Yeah.
going along. Because it's like that's also like our fawn response.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't want this person to hurt me, so I'm going to keep going along in the process.
Right.
This is also going to have to be another conversation I have with my therapist.
Right, for sure. You're like,
Like,
oh man.
how do I take a step back from when that is happening?
Yes.
Well, it's like first of all, like, and then oh my gosh, the way my brain instantly went to like self, like it. I'm also working through the artist's way right now, so I
Mm.
felt the blurt coming on, and the blurts are like whenever like our inner bully comes out,
Oh yeah.
and then like in response you rewrite it into an affirmation.
Mm.
So my blurt was, well, if I had like a higher sense of self-worth or
Oh,
a higher self-esteem, then I wouldn't go through that. But affirmation means I am healing myself by talking about this experience.
yes. Yeah.
I am healing my self-worth by speaking about this, and now I know what my boundaries are.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know if I don't feel comfortable with something financially, I should voice it.
Yeah.
And I would feel a lot like in my jaw area. I wasn't sure. I would need to confirm this again, but I kept feeling like a thread being tightened and pulled. It felt like my voice was being taken away from me. It felt like I couldn't speak up.
Mm. Wow.
My therapist kept saying, forgive yourself. You were being manipulated.
Yeah.
So forgive yourself for what you experienced.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and what a great thing, great thing that you can talk to us about it, and for all intents and purposes, still be here and healthy and, able to speak about it, which I think is great. Um, do you also, I think I heard this, so you can correct me if I didn't hear it correctly, but um, it seemed like you were also in touch with your ancestors. Were they, or at least your ancestors and or spirit guides, were they giving you affirmation of the things you were feeling or, um,
It felt like it was this weird paradox that was
mm,
happening. A lot of it was, well, you aren't doing enough work with your ancestors. So like, what are your ancestors saying? But it felt like the entire time I was there, it felt like my ancestors were telling me to leave.
mm,
But
interesting.
also, the longer I stayed there, the less I heard from them, the more I started feeling disconnected from
Hmm.
it was hard. I felt like the longer I was there, the more I got out of touch with some of my abilities.
Right. Ooh.
The things the energy I started to regain and tap into
Hmm.
when I left, I never knew I had the ability to transfer, like, I don't even know how to describe. I don't even want to call it Reiki, but I
Mm,
could feel like the light that I was transferring into someone else. The energy I had, I never had been able to do that before,
yeah.
and so now that you're saying this, I'm trying to pinpoint like where were other times when it almost felt like they took a step back to try to get me to figure it out.
Mm,
Like she needs to go through this so she learns.
right. 'Cause, like, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
That's that's kind of what it felt like. And
Oh.
and so much of like my relationship with my spirits and ancestors after that, it was
Mm,
like, you don't need to do all this for the theatrics of this. These a lot of these different things are very theatric.
Wow.
You didn't need to do this, that, and the third. What we wanted you to do was to pay off your damn credit card bill. like, like we wanted you to go to the like we wanted you to like sit your ass down and focus on this. Like we didn't want you to like spending so many of your evenings like they're like we wanted you to take care of your energy. That's why your energy
Mm,
was like so drained. But then
wow.
they would blame me for my like, oh well, are you still doing this and that? That's why your energy's being
Oh
drained.
gosh. Wow. I
When
love it.
all they wanted me to do was just to take that whole year last year that I did off
Yeah.
and heal myself in a
Mm-hmm.
way that was not draining me financially,
Yeah.
because that's how they made it seem. It's like you can't get all of this if you aren't financially invested.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
I am hoping I don't get any pushback from saying that right now, because I
Yeah.
know like I know like everything isn't black and white. There's always some kind of gray area
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah.
And I wanted to like pay my respects where they needed to be paid. Like there's this person who's gone through this initiation, so I should pay people what they're worth.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that fear of looking cheap whenever I'm like, hey, I am a grad student. I am
I know.
figuring out life right now. I am in so much student debt because of USC. It's like, I am getting paid less than minimum wage working at this funeral home for all these skimpy hours. I was working every week, almost every weekend
Wow.
while I was in school. That was the time where I think my ancestors were starting to step in.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like they just were like, we're gonna just make you work your work, we're gonna work our way into your isolation,
Right.
your hermit mode.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Yeah. Gosh, there's such a lot there. So, what would you say? Excuse me. So, would you say the steps you took to kind of get into a safe place was to take that year away and do the
Yeah.
hermit mode?
Yes, I focused on healing myself financially.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that
God.
was
Yeah.
the biggest one. Yeah, a really big step. Like we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like that's pretty
Exactly.
important there. I was also getting blamed for one of the members in the community was saying like, oh, this spirit is mad at you because you haven't moved out of your parents' house.
What?
Or like, oh, the reason why your life is getting into shit is because you're still involved with that person.
Oh,
But
gosh.
I was still involved with that person, and I had like built my life back up brick by brick by
Yeah.
working a lot of hours. Like I had no breaks. My only break was like, and even I went on vacation and it wasn't really like a break because I had to do so much. I'm not even gonna go into that. Eldest daughter, I'm glad my mom acknowledges it. But we went to the Philippines and it didn't feel as much of a vacation. It was so we needed to see my grandmother, both of my grandmothers. My
Hmm.
grandmother turned 90, and then my other grandmother, we needed a checkup on her after my Lolo passed.
Hmm.
So it felt more of like a checkup rather than a
Like
nice vacation.
vacation.
But yeah, I was nonstop all last year. I was either in school or at work or doing a lot of things. I left the funeral home, and
Hmm.
that was hard for me because I just didn't want to leave, but the universe was saying like, no, it's time. So I was working a government job for the summer, and oh my gosh, this year everything feels so quick. And that was all like I had like three different jobs that year. It was like funeral home, government within like health. care-ish. It was
Mm-hmm.
like community health, and then I transitioned into the hospital during the last third of that year.
Okay.
So it was all
That's a
very
lot.
like very career school oriented, and that's what my ancestors wanted me to do, and I was
Yeah.
feeling that today. Like I was feeling my grandpa with me, and he said, "This is what I wanted to do." I could just feel him. He's like, "This is what I." And as I'm saying that right now, I'm like, "Yeah, this is like what I want to do too."
Great.
Like I'm here in the community,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like it's not in vain. It feels like when I step into every room I step into, I'm just doing my best to help someone in their situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, it sounds like it was a lot of kind of taking care of you, uh, which is great. I think I'm all about I'm all about the taking care of yourself. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's very interesting. And I'm glad that it's so I love that when you reached out to your ancestors, they're like, I just want you to take care of your bills, focus on school instead. And you're like, oh, just regular life. Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, they're like, "You're doing too much over here."
Yes.
They needed me to balance that
Oh,
out, and, like, how did my family live their lives? They were of service to the community,
yeah.
and I got that even whenever I was in, excuse me, I was getting my eyes checked in the Philippines, and she was like, "Oh, yeah, I remember, like, growing up, I would pass by your grandmother's," or your he was talking to my dad, and I passed by my grandmother was an optometrist.
Oh,
I remember passing by her clinic, like, every day, and so it was always everyone on my dad's side was, like, a business owner of some sort. They're always launching new things, in their, oh, healthcare. They're they're very much like that left brain side, and my mom's side is, like, very much of that right brain side, but it's
mm.
still, like, in whatever they do, it's always, like, of and I think that's also our culture, it's very, like, of service to
Hmm.
others.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that keeps the whole well, isn't it the I heard somebody explaining like the term barangay is from the term balangay, I think. Again, everybody can correct me, it's fine. But it's like originally from the term that meant boat because we come from a seafaring people. So
Oh,
then everybody, if you're on a boat, everybody has to do, you got to be assigned something, right? And you got to work as a team.
share.
So in the Philippines, for maybe folks that don't know, like in the different communities, they have that's kind of separated as barangay, which I think in the US we probably think of them as like neighborhoods.
Mhm,
Like in Seattle, we have all these neighborhoods. So it'd be kind of like your barangay. So everybody
mhm.
would have like a purpose and know what was going on with each other and take care of each other, because you got to take care of each other when you're on a boat. It's kind of crucial. Um, so yeah, I keep thinking about that as like, I think that's kind of a good way forward as like, as a people of this earth, as something we can share is like, we got to treat each other like we're on a boat. And that boat kind of sometimes is a small boat with just our friends and our family, and sometimes it's a bigger boat with our neighborhood or our city or community. So, but yeah, that's really cool that your family was able to participate in that and you could see that and the impact that they had. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on, like, how much of an impact just seeing how much of an impact they had, and
Hmm.
I know I guess sometimes it feels like it can be, like, a heavy weight too, just even people seeing my last name, like, I'll meet people here like, in the diaspora, I'll meet people here, and, "Oh my gosh, your last name, are you related?" Like, "Oh, like, Janice De Belen?" I was like, "Yeah, she's actually my aunt."
Oh, wow.
She's actually my tita, and yeah, my dad. And they're like influencer level, like Filipinos who live
Yeah.
on like the street in the Philippines. Like, yeah. I was, I just had a moment to like think about that, and Paul's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's who I those are that's my family."
Yeah,
But I
those are
feel
your
like
peeps.
I don't have the nepo baby status that Olivia Rodrigo has.
All right. Like sometimes I kind of wish I had that little nip.
Like,
Like that'd be kind
or
of nice.
John Briones, yeah. Mhm. I'm thinking about John Briones' daughter, like, yeah, being Lea Salonga's offspring. I'm just like, yeah, I'm not like that level status, but I feel like I am fortunate that
Yeah.
I just have a family that comes from very humble beginnings. And I like, oh, I don't know why I cringe saying that because it feels like I feel like a lot of people say that, but it's like it's true. My mother was raised in very serious poverty.
Hmm.
And so much so I understand, like, even interacting with the people who I interacted with, I in seeing them in retrospect, I understand that they have their own traumas
Yeah.
that have shaped them into like how they operate certain things. So
Hmm.
I don't want to shame them for that because I know there's so many things that they're doing that are out of a mode of survival.
Right.
Because there's a lot of because even with like some Filipinos I know there's like that like the hustler mentality and like
Right.
that. And
Yeah.
so that can also kind of if unchecked it can get kind of like into scammer territory. So
Mm.
I get it. I understand it, but I was raised with parents who very much instilled like that's not the way we do things.
Right.
For every teenager who went through a kleptomanic phase, it
Yeah.
was don't steal. We do
Right.
not steal from small businesses. we don't we don't do that.
Yeah.
Like no matter how hard it got. But I know in like the worst kinds of circumstances, like people can be driven
Yeah.
to extremes.
Hmm. Yeah, I do feel like, you saying that your family came from humble beginnings, like I know where that's coming from. Um, and especially in the Philippines, you kind of, you can be exposed to kind of different layers of wealth and poverty. So you kind of know, right? Like, when we went to Leyte and visited my mom's family in the Philippines, you see like beautiful, like Spanish style homes right next to like little hovels, like right next to each other. And so you're kind of like, oof, that is a wealth disparity. But we have that here too in the States. It just isn't maybe quite, you know, as obvious, I guess. Um, but yeah, sometimes, yeah, I think in the States when you hear somebody saying, "Oh yeah, I was just a humble, I came from like a diamond family, but I was just a humble guy with a backpack that went to college." That freaking story that I was makes me want to barf. Yeah, I heard I was in the tech startup world. I heard that story so many damn times. I was
Oh
like,
my
I
god.
wanted to vomit. I'm like, shut up. And it was always some white person telling me. I was like, you and your backpack, whatever.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town.
Yes. I'm like, mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, I had to drive through a farm to get to my high school too.
Exactly.
But
Oh my gosh.
I mean I'm fortunate because
Hmm.
I know like my upbringing is not like my mother fought her way out of poverty, so
Right.
like we had didn't have to go hungry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still feeling that there's so much of that survival that came from that I'm seeing like a lot of those patterns like work their
Mm,
way like through me right now.
yeah. Yeah.
But we're learning, we're growing, we're
That's
recovering.
that's what we're doing. We're the next generation that is living on the earth. So we get to figure that part out. Um, but luckily we have the assistance of our ancestors and our family to help us through that. That's great. Well, gosh, we covered so many subjects. I'm impressed in this amount of time. Um, but we can kind of wrap it, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but were there any sort of, you are on the Instagram is where I found you. You are the Filipina Bruja.
Yeah.
Are there any projects or events coming up that you wanted to tell us about?
Yes. So I have a what's she called? A giveaway. I
What?
just posted the giveaway today. I'm not sure when this episode is going to be posted, but hopefully it'll be having more giveaways soon.
Okay, I can tell you if you
Oh
want
yeah.
to tell people about the giveaway while I look at my spreadsheet.
Yeah, so I am giving away a free physical copy of a really cute, it's a now sold out planner by by Valentina Voigt. And she released this planner like I think like two years ago. It's a new design, and so it's
Ooh,
now sold out. And it's super cute, super retro. So I wanted people to go into like the new lunar year, the new Aquarius on the Aquarius new moon. I wanted them to go out in style, start this year in style. And so why not do it with a cute planner?
yeah.
And I also, in what's been aiding my creative recovery in this year and what has kickstarted, like, so has been the basis of all of this, of the Filipina Bruja, how she started was going through the artist's way throughout my first
Yeah.
3 weeks living in LA and coming back here and like restarting it for like the fifth time. And so I feel something that I also mentioned in my post was I wasn't able to show up for my community until I showed up for myself. So this was a way for
Mm,
me to show up for myself, was working through all the exercises in that book and a free reading. And so those are the little three things that I'm offering in my giveaway. And
yeah.
so that will close in on February 8th.
Oh, okay. Well, this episode will come out on the February 12th. So
Okay, okay,
like,
okay.
so
Well,
you
you know, wait,
guys,
let me
yeah,
look at my
travel back in time.
for the lucky listeners.
Yeah,
Let me adjust this. Maybe
exactly.
I shall adjust her to close.
Oh
Should I
man,
say
that's
Valentine's Day?
hey, I mean, who doesn't like Valentine's Day? But
Okay.
it's yeah.
You know
Uh,
what? When I'm thinking for whoever listens to this all the way through and hears this, for anyone who mentions the
oh,
secret code word, for anyone who mentions the secret code word, what's her secret code word? Hmm. Obsidian.
ooh,
For anyone who mentions
ooh,
obsidian from this
nice.
podcast, they will get a special something something from me to be
Okay.
decided.
All
To
right.
be decided.
To be decided. It's gonna be a surprise, y'all.
It's a surprise. It's a secret.
Who doesn't like a surprise? So Obsidian, y'all, if listening, I will leave all of Michelle's contact stuff in the show notes as usual, but you can also reach out to her on, I mean, I found her on Instagram, the Filipina Bruja. Um, but yeah, so kind of what we leave people with is the words of wisdom, even though you've shared so much with us. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with today?
Remember your breath. Always come back to your breath. And forgive yourself.
Those are very good words of wisdom. I love that. Both kind of hard sometimes, but yeah, definitely need to remember.
Very, very hard.
Yes.
As,
Yes.
as I'm learning how to forgive myself, for
Mm-hmm.
whoever's listening, I'm hoping that I'll be more comfortable in sharing more of my story and just more stories through my platform. And so I'm hoping that through me sharing all of my stories, I'm hoping that it can help others go back to that self-forgiveness.
Beautifully said. I love it. Oh, thank you so much, Michelle. I'm so glad we got connected. I hope we stay connected because you're awesome. And yeah, everybody follow what Michelle's doing because it's pretty amazing. Your support means the world to us. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to like, comment, and share it with others who might find this content valuable. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more enlightening discussions. Your engagement helps us grow, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for being a part of the Casual Temple community.